So in the first couple of videos we've looked at Germany directly after World War I and the impact that the Treaty of Versailles had on German society, but I guess one of the reasons we looked at those factors, especially the weaknesses of the Weimar government, is to show how all of that instability and chaos set the stage for the rise of the Nazi Party. So a little bit about Adolf Hitler himself. He was born in Austria in 1889, which is ironic because he's not actually German. He came from humble origins. His father was a civil servant, and he actually spent most of his teenage years trying to be an artist. So he actually dropped out of art school and spent a lot of time in his youth on the streets of Vienna trying to sell his handmade postcards. And a lot of people remember that about Hitler because it's such a contrast to the brutal dictator that he became, a struggling art student trying to be an artist. So it was in Vienna that he sort of picked up a lot of his anti-Semitic views as well, which is anti-Jewish views. It's important to know that Hitler didn't invent those viewpoints. He actually sort of picked them up as he went, and they were actually quite common throughout Europe. And so in 1914, which is the same year as World War I broke out, he joined the German army, and it was here that he finally found a place to belong and somewhere that he felt he fitted in. He was won an Iron Cross as a soldier, which showed that he was brave and very enthusiastic, and it was his time in the army that really shaped him as a person and a leader. Especially the defeat at the end of World War I really built up a lot of, hatred and suspicion about Jewish people, about German society, and really turned him into the political leader that he became. So the Nazi Party itself wasn't actually invented by Hitler. So after Hitler, after World War I finished, he actually had a job to actually spy on a lot of these different parties, political parties, making sure that they weren't being overly violent or extreme and things like that. And when he came to this German Workers' Party, as it was known as, he liked what he saw and he thought this would be a perfect platform for him to share his ideologies. And so this party was actually founded in 1919 by Anton Drexler, as you can see. And the word Nazi actually comes from the full title of the party, the National Socialist German Workers' Party. As you can see now at the bottom, the Nazi, taken as an abbreviation. So that was the nickname of the party. And so soon Hitler adopted the swastika symbol for the Nazis, the Hakenkreuz, as it's called in German, which stands for hooked cross. And this became the symbol of the Nazis. So the red represented the socialist aspect of the movement, the white represented nationalism and the purity of the German race, and the cross or the swastika represented the ongoing struggle of the Aryan people, the pure-blooded race, against all of the inferior races. And so we talked in the previous videos about 1923 being a really important year in the Weimar government. Firstly, there was the French invasion of the Ruhr region, which caused crisis, and then there was the hyperinflation crisis. So another thing that happened in that year was Hitler's Munich Putsch, where he tried to forcibly overthrow the government. Because of those crises that were happening in 1923, Hitler deemed it a good time to try to overthrow the Weimar government. He saw that it was crumbling, he thought that it was weak and on its knees. And so what he had planned to do, together with the ex-army general Ludendorff, was to create an uprising in Munich with the hope of getting support of the army and then marching on Berlin and taking over the government. So that was the plan. So Hitler would go to a beer hall. This event is also called the Beer Hall Putsch. So he'd go to a beer hall where the Bavarian minister Gustav Kahr was giving a speech, and he would take him at gunpoint and basically use Ludendorff to rally the army and march through the streets to Berlin. This was the plan, but everything didn't quite click. So taking a step back, who were the SA? The SA were mentioned in the previous slide. The SA were Hitler's private army. They're called a paramilitary force, which means a legal political army, and so they were kind of thugs that roamed the streets with him, intimidating people and trying to influence people to do what Hitler wanted them to do. And so this is the SA stands for Sturmabteilung, which is the stormtroopers, and they wore the familiar brown shirts. And so they're the group that Hitler brought along with him, hoping to link up with the army and march on Berlin. But due to a number of factors that you can read here, things didn't go to plan. So the actual putsch itself was a disaster. I think Hitler only had 3,000 members in the Nazi Party at that stage, and he's underestimated how much manpower it was going to take to overthrow the country. And when the army did not cooperate with what he wanted them to do, then he had no chance. So there was a violent confrontation with police. 16 Nazi members were killed, and Hitler was arrested and charged with treason. So the event itself, the Munich Putsch, was a failure. It was a fiasco. Nothing went to plan at all. But what happened soon after the Putsch actually turned into a major success for Hitler. He became, a celebrity very quickly because he had made the newspapers, and he became, a well-known personality in the political circles. But he stood trial, a relatively public trial for his crimes, and this is where he got to really speak to a big audience, and he got to not only defend himself on the stand, but actually preach his Nazi ideologies. And this was the biggest audience that he'd had the chance to speak to, and so he really turned this into a media circus and used it as a huge propaganda opportunity for the Nazi Party. And so in terms of his trial, there were lots of things that went right for Hitler. The judge liked him. The judge sympathised with his traditional right-wing views, as opposed to the New Age Weimar sort of attitude. There were lots of reporters and newspapers there, and so Hitler's trial was widely broadcast across the country. Hitler became recognised as a political leader in his own right, even though the Nazi Party themselves were still relatively minor. He got a light sentence, and his prison stay was very cushy. He could have visitors, and he spent his prison sentence writing his infamous book Mein Kampf, My Struggle, where he outlined his views on Germany, expanding Germany, on his hatred for the Jews, and things like that. So the Munich Putsch is a really significant event, not because of what it achieved as an event itself, because it was a failure, as we know, but that really set the ball in motion for Hitler to become the personality of Hitler that we know. And his trial and the media exposure that gained afterwards, Hitler turned into a real positive. And so in the next video, we're going to look at further steps that Hitler took towards dictatorship.